Yeah, because I mean he was a lyricist, and he definitely had a lot to offer with words, you know. His lyrics were really interesting, and he'd stay up at night for hours with a notebook, just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, and not necessarily lyrics, just writing. And I think a lot of his lyrics came from those journals where he just sort of pick lines out of these, you know, play on words here and there, and and he enjoyed writing a lot. I don't enjoy writing lyrics. Yeah, I mean, I played them tapes of stuff, and there were a few songs that Kurt liked a lot and wanted to turn into Nirvana songs, but for some reason they just never did. The song Alone and Easy Target, that song, Kurt really liked that song a lot, and he liked the chorus a lot, and I think he wanted to make the chorus into something. And then there's a song called Exhausted that apparently he actually never said to me, but he liked the song a lot. He just wanted to write his own lyrics to it, and I think he was afraid to ask me if we could do the song, but with his lyrics, which I would have said, shit, sure, fine, that'd be great.
But didn't you have all these great songs in your head that you had written? I mean, you wrote great songs for Foo Fighters. Well,
I lived with this friend of mine, and we had an 8-track studio in the basement. So I just go record by myself in the basement.
Did you ever say to Kurt, listen, I've got great songs?
No.
You would not do that.
You never let him hear anything you wrote?
He heard some, and he liked a couple of them. There were 2 that he really liked, he wanted to do, but he was afraid to ask me if he could change the lyrics.
Do you think if Kurt hadn't died, you'd still be in Nirvana and never have written any of your songs that you wrote for Foo Fighters and never have gone out and done it? Like, in a way, his death liberated you, in a weird sense, right?
I mean, I know that I would still be recording and writing stuff of my own. Because that's one of the great... Taylor does the same thing. It's like, everybody in this band goes out and does side projects.
Right.
You know? So when they come back to this, it's the Foo Fighters, and then...
but you weren't doing that when you were in Nirvana. You weren't doing side projects.
Well, I was, but I just wasn't letting anyone hear it.
Because I think...
Because I was nervous about it.
But don't you think that might have even ruined Nirvana? Like, you were the guy in Nirvana who played drums, and all of a sudden you go off and do your own thing, it breaks up the band. You might never have really... blossom. We might not know you that well.
It would be, if things had been different, things would be different for sure.
When he killed himself, were you immediately in a depression, or did you see it? You were.
Yeah.
And did you say to yourself, that's it, it's the end of my career,
yes.
I'm never going to go anywhere?
Yep.
Did you sit and meet with Chris, the other guy in Nirvana, and say, should we form a band together? I always thought it was, no, because that would have been weird.
Yep.
You 2 guys with some new frontman.
It was way too heavy. We've never talked about that, ever. It's been 20 years. We still haven't talked about it.
So when Kurt dies, what's your game plan? Or you don't have one? You start to drift?
Yeah, I just, you know...
Who tells you your lead singer's gone? I mean, how do you find that out?
I don't even remember who told me. I remember the day, but I don't remember who... I think maybe it was on the news or something weird. I don't know. I don't remember.
Like
exactly
the news,
like you didn't get a call. You just heard it.
I think it happened, and then it just all happened. Like, and the phone's off the hook, and
people are calling this and that.
Yeah.
And what do you do that day? You just go into shock. I mean, you
everybody got together. Everybody went over to Chris Novoselic's house, and
hung out.
Hung out
because you were there comforting one another.
Yep.
And no one says to each other, what are we going to do now? But it's got to be in your mind. At some point, it hits you like, what am I doing with the rest of my life?
It was just such a weird time. And we were kids, I was like 25 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was strange. And I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't listen to Nirvana. I couldn't listen. I'd turn on the radio and I'd hear like, all by myself. I start crying, Like, it was terrible.
Did you go into therapy after that?
Yeah.
You did?
I was in therapy before that for my first marriage, because I was married to someone who was like, we should go. The idea was that the 2 of us go to different therapists, and then we all get together at some point.
How much therapy can you go through? That's a lot of therapy, right? So fortunately, you were able to go to therapy and through that and talk to someone about it.
Yeah, it was good.
And what was the thrust of that? Like, what should I do with the rest of my life? I mean, once you come off the initial shock.
Well, I mean... you know,
You almost joined
more
Tom
than
Petty.
yeah.
What'd you do?
Well, I played with Tom Petty on Saturday Night Live.
Right.
That was really the first thing I did. I mean, the first
Play
thing I
drums.
did, I started getting calls asking if I wanted to play drums with other bands. I'm like, no, man, I don't want to play. I don't even know if I ever want to play drums again.
Not after you played drums for Nirvana. Would have been sort of weird.
Yeah, and I mean, just sitting down at a drum set reminded me of Kurt. It reminded me of Nirvana, and it was just sad. So,
Was it all good with Kurt? I mean, were you on good
things got
terms?
weird towards the end.
So did that make you feel even weirder about his death because things got so weird? Were you sort of estranged?
Yeah, I mean, everybody sort of was. I think at that point, it had sort of split off, and it just got really weird. It was,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if anybody really does, but it had gotten to the point where
He wasn't talking to you?
well, they were just, you know, I don't do drugs.
Right.
I haven't done drugs since I was a kid.
Right.
20 years old, I think, is when I stopped. And so, you know, there were drugs around, and there was like the people who did the drugs, and then there were people that didn't do the drugs. And I didn't do the drugs, and so I was just out of that world, you know. And if you're in it, you're in it. If you're not, you're out.
Well, it reminds me, I got into the iPhone, and John Hine was in an Android, and I wasn't hanging
You
out
see
with him.
how that split you guys up?
Everyone who's onto the iPhone was
Isn't it
my
weird how
friend.
that works?
Yeah,
I know.
but in all seriousness, that's true. The drugs become alienating in the sense that
Sure.
when you're into the drug culture, you want to hang out with other guys who do drugs.
You don't care about anyone but yourself at that point.
I know.
That's how it works.
So in the last couple of months, you hadn't even been in touch with Kurt.
No, we had.
Right.
And but
Were you close to breaking up the band anyway? Do you think you guys would have broken up because Kurt was going his own way?
I think at that point it was important that we take a break. I think everybody felt that way. It was like time to take a break.
Does it personally hurt you when Courtney Love goes around spouting off that Kurt hated you at the end, you were his least favorite person, he didn't like... I mean, she goes around with stories, and some of the
And
stories...
still, that was all drugs.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with, even if it were true.
Honestly,
It's a mean thing to say because you did... of course you had a relationship with Kurt, and you made great music together. It's hurtful.
the way I look at it is I have my version of what happened, and I have my memories, and Pat and I talk about that stuff all the time, and we laugh about the good times, and we talk about the bad times sometimes, but, you know, it's those kind of, you can't really let those things get to you.
You're able to hold on to your version of it? You don't let her version of things kind of, because I know...
How much was she around? Was she there all the
Yeah,
time?
they were married, you know.
I don't know. I'm just asking.
I get very offended, probably too much. I lose my own opinion sometimes. When somebody does it, they ruin my experience.
Right.
You know, and it hurts me.
Well, not really so much for me, because you also have to understand that the circumstances are so extraordinary that everybody's got their version of what happened, you know? It's such a public event, that whole thing. It's not like my buddy Jimmy passed away and, you know, nobody really knew.